let's review this a little bit tonight because this is from John Gottman. I use this all the time when I'm counseling couples. And I think this worksheet kind of distills Gottman's theories. It's something that's very practical to use. It has a good flow to it. And the thing that we talked about last week, and this is where I start when I'm talking to couples, is the divorce predictors. So the divorce predictors. Now Gottman says, as you know from your reading, that he can predict with like 91% accuracy in just a few minutes whether couples are going to stay together or not. And the thing he does is he looks for these divorce predictors. Now, if you're married and you're in a relationship, well, guess what? You have some of these divorce predictors. And in the 32 years that my wife and I have been married, we've certainly had all these. But it's what you do about it. You know, do you work through these things or do you let them just destroy you? Let's talk about the divorce predictors again and review them. In part because you're going to see some of this on your midterm. So I want you to be very familiar with it. And in terms of being practical, and I want this to be a practical class, you can use this. This is a really easy, user-friendly tool. Okay? Now, feel free to write on that and make notes. I have some clean copies if you want. So you can take a clean copy with you and make photocopies and use it. Okay? Now, when he talks about the divorce predictors, he talks about a negative climate. What causes that negative climate primarily? We talked about this last week.
Unresolved anger.
Yes, very good. You get a little star for tonight. That's right on. It's unresolved anger. When couples get into huge fights over really kind of insignificant things, it's not those little insignificant things, those little annoyances that are really the issue. It's unresolved anger, just waiting for something to go off. Okay? Unresolved anger. Does the Bible say anything about that? Yes, it does. Don't let the sun go down in your anger. In Ephesians chapter 4, be angry. That is, talk about things. Not all anger is bad. Jesus got angry. It's how you express your anger and what you're angry about. There are times that you should have righteous anger. But if you have righteous anger, that doesn't mean you run somebody over, something like that. You have to express that constructively. So, a negative climate. The four horsemen. Now, I don't like his terminology here. The four horsemen come from the four horsemen of the apocalypse in Revelation chapter 6. But I guess he would say, well, that's the four horsemen in relationships, and I guess that's kind of true. Criticism and contempt on the one side, that is, the person in the relationship that is the most assertive. And who tends to be the most assertive? Yeah, it's the women. Not all the time, but most of the time. And I think the reason for that is because women are better at relationships. Just are. And because they're better at relationships, they tend to expect more. And on the other side of that is defensiveness and stonewalling. Criticism, I gave the example last week. Say if somebody wanted to come in my office, and I use this as an example when I was the Family Life Chaplain at Fort Bliss. If somebody really wanted to come in my office, they're knocking on the door, and I'm ignoring them. start knocking louder and harder, and they may start kicking the door and slapping the door and yelling. Well, that criticism, the knocking, gets turned up to contempt. And they're thinking, what is wrong with you? Why aren't you responding to me? The reaction for the person who is more, so what would be a better word? I'm thinking withdrawn, but that's not the correct word. That's not as assertive in relationships. In my relationship with my wife, she's more the assertive one, and I'm less assertive. And that tends to be typical. I would get defensive. I would get defensive by that defensive being criticized, and as that volume continues to be turned up, I'll start stonewalling her. I'll just give her the silent treatment. I'll just block her out. Okay. How do we resolve this collision from criticism and contempt on the one side and defensiveness and stonewalling on the other? Because if it's not resolved, you get a divorce. How do we resolve it? How would you resolve that in counseling if you're sitting down with a couple? I would say turning down the volume. And maybe they're talking past one another. Is it okay to fight? Is it okay to argue? Yes. But you have to fight fair. And you have to stay on topic, on what the real issue is. That doesn't mean it's okay to bring up something that happened 6 months ago, or a year ago, or 10 years ago. What would be an example of a harsh startup? I think
fight, and then, well, I guess not so much getting into a fight, but maybe the words leading to a fight.
yeah. And sometimes that can just be an expression, a tone of voice, body language, you know? So that harsh startup, like if my wife calls me and I answer the phone like, yes, what is it? That's a harsh startup, and that starts an argument right then. But if I answer the phone with a gentle tone of voice, that sets the course of the conversation, okay? So harsh startups are a divorce predictor. Poor repairs, that is not repairing the relationship and not accepting influence. Now, let's look over on the other side of the page, resolving conflict, and these are really the way to the antidote for the divorce predictors. Recognizing solvable versus perpetual problems. One of the things that I often hear is that people say, well, we're come for counseling because we want to communicate better. That's not really the issue. Because I think couples can communicate very clearly. You can communicate crystal clear to the other person, but that doesn't mean you're going to agree. So it's recognizing solvable versus perpetual problems. And by that, I mean, what is really important to the person? Because there are some things that you're just not going to, you communicate perfectly, but that doesn't mean you're going to agree. Under perpetual problems at the bottom right-hand corner of the page, it says acceptance, which is compromise, and listen to dreams. One issue, and it sounds trivial when I share it to people, but it was a huge issue for me, and we really fought about it. I Yorkshire Terrier. I love that dog. And even after he died, I was probably about 28. He lived 15 years. I would still dream about him. 20 years later, you know, like every 3 or 4 months he'd be in my dream. And he's just kind of bouncing around in my dream, you know. He was there. So I really wanted a dog. Now my wife she's not a dog person. She is kind of now, but for her marriage, she's a cat person. She didn't want a dog, and we would fight about this. Well, I didn't want just any dog. I wanted a pit bull. And I feel like they got in a bum rap, and, you know, so I wanted a pit bull, and we would fight about that. I couldn't get a dog until I knew that this was going to be my last assignment. Because there's a lot of places where you can't have pit bulls. You can't take them to Hawaii. We lived in Hawaii for 8 years. Can't have them there. Now you can buy one there, but you can't bring one to the island. I don't know if you can have them in Japan and in Korea. I spent a year in Korea. I've been to Japan 8 times. I never saw any pit bulls there. Certain countries you can't have them. You can't have them in Australia. You can't have them in New Zealand. I don't think you can have them in England. So there's some places like that where you can't have them. So I had to be sure that this is going to be my last assignment so I could spend time with them, you know, all that stuff. So when I was retiring, I wanted to get a dog. And she said, no, we're not getting a dog. We're not getting one. They're so ugly. You know, just like that. And it really set me off, man. So we would really fight about this. And it came to a head. Now, my wife tends to talk in her sleep. And she's kind of snores too. She talks in her sleep, and she talks very clearly in her sleep. You could actually, my kids have sometimes had conversations with her when she's asleep, messing with her, but she's talking in her sleep, and she's dreaming about this argument we had about the dog. And she said, oh, it's so ugly, and no, Steve, we're not getting that. No, what's wrong with you? No. And so I'm listening to this go on in bed, and man, I'm just getting so mad. I'm really mad. So, unresolved anger, I was mad for like 3 days, and she said, did I do something? You know, why are you mad at me? And so I told her, and she said, if it means that much to you, okay. Yep. So, I took that and ran with it, and about 3 days later, I got a dog. And it was a beautiful little pit bull puppy. And she realized that for me, that was one of my dreams. That was a perpetual problem. She realized that, finally, she realized how important this was to me. That I really wanted to have a dog that I could love, and that would love me, and I would be close to, like the dog I had growing up. Very important to me. And she recognized that and let me do it. Okay? And now she loves the dog too. He sleeps on our bed. He's 92 pounds. He's all muscle. And he tends to push me out of bed, but oh well. You know. She loves him too. But she recognized that that was one of my dreams. And that was a perpetual problem. If she had continued to say, no, and we have 4 cats, you know, no, you're not getting your dog, that would have really been a problem for us. And she recognized that. On other things, perpetual problems, I can't really think of an example with her because she's very creative, you know, she decorates the house, and I pretty much let her do whatever she wants because I know that's important to her. Does that sort of make sense? You know, on other things, it wouldn't make a difference to me. You know, I may not like I may not like a couch she picks out or something, but it's not that important to me. I know it's important to her, and so I would give in. A lot of times it's not the thing, it's what the thing means. I mean, certain things really have roots in our lives. This goes all the way, this with the dog, went all the way back to my childhood. It was very significant to me. On other things, it may be very significant to her, and I would have to understand that. A lot of times it's not the issue, it's what's behind it. It's the roots, it's where it comes from. Does that make sense? So it's not just communication, it's understanding why that is so important. And the give and take, the negotiation that goes on. We've all seen relationships where one person just kind of walks all over the other person and they're headed for divorce. That's not going to work. There has to be a give and take. There has to be a compromise. Okay, so the next one, the top of the right-hand side of the page, resolving conflict, reducing divorce predictors, soft startups. We've already talked about that. Soft startups. In Proverbs chapter 15 and verse 1, it says, a quiet answer turns away wrath. A quiet answer or a gentle answer turns away wrath. Repairing the relationship. Making up. How do you make up? It's very important that we do. Because it's like adding a deposit to your relationship bank account. Every time you have a fight, every time you have a problem, that's a withdrawal. You make deposits by how you repair the relationship. Are couples intimate with each other? It's maybe a little awkward to bring up, but it's important. Are you being intimate with each other? Are you, if you're not, why not? Having another thing for repair is a date night. Do you think those are important? Actually, they are. There are times in our marriage where we've had that, and then life gets busy and comes at you fast, and you got little kids and all that other stuff, and you get away from that. But speaking for myself, my relationship, my marriage has been better whenever we're having those date nights. Just her and I together. And they don't have to be expensive. I mean, maybe you can go out to eat, or maybe you can go to a park, maybe you can go for a walk, something. But that's important. And that's repairing the relationship. Self-soothe. What is self-soothing? When you read that, what do you think of?
Like time away by yourself to de-stress or something.
Yeah. Whatever it is that helps you to get out of your skin, you know? It might be a hobby. It might be, well, you guys have any hobbies? What do you like to do?
Listen to music.
Listen to music. Okay.
To journal.
Journal. Very good. Yeah.
Cooking, if I haven't done a lot of it.
I'm so jealous. What about you guys?
Clean.
Cleaning.
Or just reading?
Reading, yeah. I like to out of my own skin, Reading a book. Right now I'm rereading The Hobbit. You guys ever read The Hobbit? It's a wonderful book. The Hobbit is the prelude to The Lord of the Rings. Don't judge the books by the movies. I thought the movies were kind of dumb. But the books are great, and they're Christian stories. Tolkien was a Christian. He and C.S. Lewis were close friends. And there are Christian principles throughout The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings. So I'm rereading those like the 5th time since I've been a Christian reading those books. But reading, maybe watching movies, maybe playing a game. A lot of, people, I don't know if you guys are into games. You into games? No? We're all old. For younger people, they're into games, man. I was talking to one couple, and she was complaining that when he comes home from work as a soldier, and he just plays games. And I said, well, how long? He gets online and he's playing Call of Duty or whatever. I said, well, how long is he playing? And, I was thinking, it's like he'll do it all night. He'll do it all weekend, and just kind of ignores the wife and the kids and he's playing this game. And I said, well, what would be a limited time? I think it's okay to play your game as long as you don't overdo it. So it would be a limited time. And he thought 3 hours would be 3 hours.
Right.
Come on, man. And that was a big reduction for him. Maybe an hour, maybe an hour and a half. That's okay. But there has to be a limit on it. For some people, they love to go fishing or hunting. Or, I like to go on walks, runs, listening to audiobooks. That helps me to get out of my skin. Walking my dog. For some people, my wife, she's very creative, so she loves to do crafts. Anything that you're doing, you're concentrating on, that's self-soothing. And you really should have something like that. Some of the worst offenders that don't have any hobbies or self-soothing, pastors. And that's one of the reasons that so many pastors burn out. Having time to decompress. Okay, it has to be within reason, but it's important to do that. Compromising, give and take. You can't have everything your own way. If you do, that is a divorce predictor. What do you think it means? The bottom one on the left-hand side, our divorce predictors, is not accepting influence. Resolving conflict is accepting influence. Accepting influence from your spouse.
It's like compromising.
Yeah. Listening to them. I think that goes back to unresolved anger, oftentimes. I'm not going to listen to her. I'm not going to listen to him. Part of that accepting influence is being positive. Instead of being negative about everything, being positive. Encouraging. Instead of tearing them down, building them up. Encouraging them. The word encourage means to impart courage. Encouragement is extremely important, I think, in counseling. You see it running through a number of different theories. Encouraging people, building them up. Okay, any questions about this? Okay. So I would encourage you to hold on to this. If you need a clean copy, I have some with me. It's a good, effective tool to work through these things and talk about ways to repair the relationship and to correct these divorce predictors. Okay? Now, the next thing, any questions about that? Okay, be very familiar with this. Like some of the questions I might ask you, in what order are the four horsemen? I think it's important. Criticism and contempt. The reaction is defensiveness and stonewalling. Be familiar with recognizing solvable versus perpetual problems, which is give and take. And part of that give and take, part of that compromising, part of the negotiation is how important certain things are to the other person. Sometimes it's just not obvious why something is so important to the other person or not. Listen to their dreams, encouraging them. And most affairs start for emotional reasons. If there's a wife, for example, who tears down her husband, who criticizes him, who doesn't listen to his dreams, there may be some woman at work who's going to say, "Oh, that's such a great idea. Build him up." And husbands that tear down their wives, they leave them vulnerable to affairs. We have to protect our spouses. And part of the way we protect them is by building them up, by listening to them, by encouraging them. Okay. Now, let's talk about the 5 stages of grief. This is another thing that I want you to be familiar with. The 5 stages of grief. 5 primary stages. I've seen as many as 8 stages, but basically it's 5. And they tend to come in more or less this order, starting out with denial, and know these stages of grief, and know them in order for your midterm. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. When people are going through these stages of grief, they can get stuck. They can get overwhelmed. Things can happen and they can get these things out of order. You can get overloaded. I told you about Mary. There's a client I had, 65 years old. She was a widow. And she was stuck in depression. She was stuck in that 4th stage because she was overwhelmed. In 1 year, she'd had 4 very significant deaths in her life. Her husband, her father, her older sister, and her little dog. The little dog was like a child to her. And she was stuck, she was overloaded. So denial. I think that is a way that keeps us from being overwhelmed when there there's first a death, it's denial. It's not real. In fact, the time that it starts to get real, when that numbness, when that denial state starts to wear off, it's about a month, about 6 weeks, when it starts to hit us, the reality of that grief. I've been volunteering. I volunteer on Thursdays at Survivor Outreach Services on Post. I've been leading a grief support group there once a month. About 20, 22 people come. They're Gold Star families. And Gold Star families are families that lost a soldier. You would think, like in combat, some are in combat, some are in accidents, some are illnesses. The most in this group are suicides. The people that come to this group, and I've been doing it for 2 years, about 80% are there because of suicides. Now, I've seen people kind of come to the group for a while and leave, but that core of the group, they're because of suicides primarily. And they're stuck. I talked to 2 clients today. One was there because of suicide. Her husband killed himself, shot himself. And the other one was there because her husband, who was only 45, had a reaction went into anaphylactic shock and died unexpectedly. The one whose husband died unexpectedly, and this is a couple years ago, she's angry. She's angry. She's in that anger stage. For the one whose husband killed himself, and this has been very recent, this is only a few months ago. Her husband was a sergeant major course, and he killed himself. She's angry too, and somewhat bargaining. Now, when it says bargaining, that seemed kind of, when I saw that term, when I was studying this, I thought, bargaining, what does that mean? It means living in the past. Living in the past. If only I'd done this. If only I'd done that. If only this, if only that. So living in the past. And that, of course, can be horrible. And can be very unfair to yourself. Because one of the thinking errors, and we'll talk about thinking errors when we come to cognitive behavioral therapy, is hindsight bias. Hindsight bias is where we, in the present, we're judging ourselves on things we did in the past with knowledge that we have in the present that would be impossible for us to have in the past. Does that make sense? Okay. So, knowing what I know now, I'm criticizing myself for something that I could not have known back then. When it comes to suicide, one of the things that is so hard to get and to deal with, my stepbrother killed himself when we were kids. He was 15, I think I was 14. And my mom and his dad, maybe I was 13, had gotten a divorce. And we'd been out of the house about 4 months. And Mike, my stepbrother, had been very depressed, and our stepfather was very hard on Mike. Very hard on him. And Mike had been very depressed and had attempted attempted suicide once before with pills. And it seemed like he was doing okay now. He seemed happy, he was smiling, he wasn't in this deep depression. Got a puppy, it was in October, so he started school. And he went in the bathroom one morning in October, I think it was October 16th, and took his dad's 30-30 rifle that was in the master, well, it was near the master bathroom, it was in the closet. And Mike took it out and put the barrel in his mouth, blew the black of his head off. Gary, his brother, his half-brother, heard the shot and came in the bathroom in time to see Mike still. I mean, he was brain dead, but the body is like a machine. It takes time to wear down. It's not like in the movies. So Mike, his body's still reacting and blood's spraying all over the place. And, Gary was never the same after that. It really destroyed his life. But before Mike killed himself, he seemed fine. He seemed happy. He seemed cheerful. I've known others, guys in the military, who they seem to come out of their depression and what's bothering them. They seem to have snapped out of it. And then they kill themselves. Have you guys had any of that experience? Yeah. When they're in that deep depression, they don't have the energy to deal with, to make this decision. Or when they seem to be cheerful again, they seem to, come out of it, they made the decision that they're going to do it. And they do it. So, that first stage is denial. Followed by anger. So when denial wears off, the response is angry. You're angry. Angry at them, angry at you, angry at circumstances. I was talking to my client today, the one who passed away with anaphylactic shock. He was telling the paramedics, I need a shot of adrenaline. She was telling the paramedics and the 911 operator, he needs a shot of adrenaline. And even though it was in the records that the paramedics gave him a shot in the ambulance, he died in the ambulance. She doesn't think they did. So whether they did or whether they didn't, she's angry about that. Okay. Angry with family members and how they've reacted, and grabbing money and life insurance and things like that. So there's anger. When anger starts to dissipate, it becomes into bargaining where we're living in the past. If only things were different. If only I'd done this, or if only they'd done that. And then depression is where we're living in the present, with the present situation, and we're depressed. Does that progression make sense? Okay. And then finally, acceptance. And acceptance doesn't mean that you're okay with it, but you can go on with your life. And you can get stuck in these stages. Or something happens and you can go back to anger again, Now, under the case discussion, we've talked about Mary and what I did with her, and I think this was this was the Holy Spirit guiding me with her, and she was a believer, was to get her to talk about her husband. Tell me all about it. And I could see each week, and we did this for several weeks, as she told me about him and as she relived some of those memories, her mood lightened. She was smiling. And when she first came in for counseling, she looked kind of disheveled. But as we continued to do that, talking about her husband, and I learned all about their vacations, and what he did at work, and what the house was like, and how he was kind of like a mixer-fix kind of a handyman, and how he'd done things in the yard, and all of that. It was helping her. It was getting it out. And then she told me about her dad, and so forth. So that was that particular situation. The second case, I put down a first sergeant, 50-year-old retired infantry first sergeant with blood cancer. And on this particular case, I missed it. I failed. Now I thought I was the perfect guy to talk to him. And our receptionist who would kind of assign cases to the different counselors, she thought I was perfect for him too. We're in the same age, 50s. He was an infantryman, I was an infantryman. He came in the Army around the same time I did. He was in Panama, I was in Panama. He was in the Gulf War, I was in the Gulf War, I was an infantryman, all that stuff. I had cancer. I had cancer when I was 49. He had blood cancer when he was 50. So there was a lot of commonality there. And when he came in and he was telling me the problem, he was an African American. He was a deacon in his church. He was a Christian. I thought, perfect for him. And he asked me, do you think God's cursed me? Do you think God is punishing me with this cancer? How would you answer that question? Chances are, you'd answer it the same way I answered it. I answered it like a pastor. We talked about Job, and I answered like a pastor. But when I was giving him that answer, I could tell that wasn't his question. I answered a Bible question it wasn't a Bible question.
Answer the question with the Bible answer.
Yeah. And he'd asked that same question, I'm sure, to his pastor and the other deacons and so forth. But that wasn't what he needed.
It was a relationship question.
Yes. It was a counseling question. And I noticed about maybe half hour into our session that I lost him. And he was polite, but he was just kind of biding his time until our session was over. And I walked him out and said goodbye, and he didn't set up another appointment, and I knew that I missed him. And it took me about 3 weeks to figure it out, because I knew I'd failed him. And I was just starting counseling, so I think I'd be faster on the uptake now, but at the time I just didn't get it. So what I could have done, and I think what I should have done in hindsight, is I should have asked, why do you feel that way? And draw him out to why he felt that God had cursed him. So I'm saying this, and I think this is important, because this is really a class, it's family life, but this is pastoral counseling. And we have to be careful that we don't answer a counseling question with a Bible answer. You know? And that's kind of our instinct. But I missed it because I gave him a Bible answer for a counseling question, and that I didn't answer that where that hurt was. Why do you feel that God has cursed you? Yeah.
I
And
think
that's,
it can be used both ways, but I think the Bible answer could come later for the healing,
yeah,
but first it's that emotional connection of dealing with the hurt as, you know, just kind of being there at that level with them.
yeah. So be sensitive to that. Be sensitive to that. Okay. Now with this group that I deal with each month, and I'm volunteering there now, so I'm seeing some of them at a deeper level. I saw them once a month in a group, and the installation chaplain's office, we provide a meal for them each month, and then I talk to them about different grief things. But since I've done this the last 2 weeks, I'm getting to see them at a deeper level, really finding out more of the backstory. But one of the things that I'm trying to work on with them in the group is, how do I get them unstuck with the suicide? Because that's what most of them are coming for, the suicide. Talking to the spouse today, whose husband killed himself just a few months ago. Right now I'm just listening. Her mother-in-law has been very, like for example, if a dog gets hit by a car, you have to be very careful when you're trying to help the dog, take him to the vet or whatever. It's going to bite you. You have to put a muzzle on it, so it'll bite you. Because it's in so much pain, it just lashes out. And people do that too. When they're in pain, they just lash out. And her mother-in-law is doing that. And it's kind of a difficult person anyway, I think. But her mother-in-law is doing that, and it's really hurt this spouse. But one of the things that I think could be an issue for her is she's blaming herself. What did I do to cause this? Or why didn't he talk to me? Why couldn't I help him?
Did you miss it?
What's that?
How did they miss it? Like, how did they not catch it is, I guess, that's the big question.
Yeah. There's guilt. And there's shame. If your loved one died in action, died in Iraq, Afghanistan, that's easier to take. I mean, you still grieve, you're still hurting, but died in an honorable way. If your loved one died in an accident or with an illness, you can handle that a little bit better. But when it's suicide, one of the reasons I think they're stuck is because of the shame involved and the stigma of suicide. Suicide's up all around the world. In the Army, in 2004, the suicide rate doubled. It's true in all the other services too. Doubled. And we thought initially, well, it's because of the deployments. But half the people that kill themselves never deploy. And they're not just active duty soldiers, they're National Guard people, reservists. But it's not just limited to the military. I mean, suicide is up all across the world, all the different demographic groups. Well, we're out of time. We still got a couple more weeks for the midterm, but be working on your book reviews. Work on your Philippians. Whether you're going to write it out, remember no mistakes, or if you want to read it in class. Now, if you're ready to read it, you can do that. You don't have to wait until the end. Okay. And if you want to write it out early, you can do that too. But remember, it has to be by hand. And no white out, no corrections, no crossed out stuff. You're lucky you're not having to do it on a scroll or something. One page. If you mess up on the first page, you got one page is perfect. On the second page, you got a little mistake. Well, just redo page 2. And you're not on a scroll. Okay? Any questions? All right. We will go over the midterm. Don't stress about the midterm. You guys will do fine. I'll give you a heads up on the things to know. Know the 5 stages of grief in order. Okay? And I might ask you. I was going to say, no, just know them in order. On the divorce predictors, nor the 4 horsemen. Be familiar with this, because I want you to be able to use this. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and close in a word of prayer. Father, thank you for this time with my brothers and sisters. Lord, I pray that you would guide us and lead us as we strive to be able to help and comfort others with the problems in their lives. Lord, you've given us each other to help each other. And I pray, Lord, that you give us not just the intent, not just the will, but also the skills to do it more effectively. So, Lord, we thank you and we praise you in Jesus' name.